Mental wellness has been declared a global development priority by no less than the United Nations Organization. In very recent years, it has been a much talked about concern by educators, medical professionals, parents, counselors, HR management, and the general public. Project Sampaguita saw a great need to elevate knowledge and awareness regarding mental health.
Bringing in mental wellness to Cebu was a result of the unexpected audience enthusiasm when it was first held in Manila last October 2019. Both our forum speakers and us at Fiat realized that a topic so life-affecting and yet held in a hush as if it were taboo is a fresh breath of hope and peace for all of us. Fiat sincerely thanks Project Sampaguita for making this forum a reality in spite of the threats of COVID-19. We also thank all of you in the audience for being here this morning. The soul of Fiat's advocacy is the family. It is the most wonderful source of human happiness gifted us by God. What concerns the family is always at the core of Fiat's activities. This morning, as we go deeper into the intimacy of the family, we will attempt to bring out awareness and understanding of the current landscape of mental wellness. Project Sampaguita and Fiat gather real-time, real knowledge, insight, experience, and passion of our resource speakers to tell us that today, not tomorrow, we all need to join hands to help a loved one, a family member, a friend, or neighbor find life again after journeying through mental unwellness in any form. Remember John Lennon, the famous Beatle who enchanted the world with music and song? Amidst amazing success and fame, from a personal experience, he said, and I quote, "One thing you can't hide is when you are crippled inside," end of quote. John was a child of those decades of the 1960s and 70s of flower power and the hippies. In a painful journey of realization and discovered hope, when fame had not become ashes, he and fellow Beatle Paul McCartney found the answer to what crippled inside. They have made immortal the heartening biographical song, "Let It Be." I quote from it. When I find myself in trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. For though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer, let it be. Thank you, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. You have sung and said it all. A story that could be the story of many of us, even among the audience today. For Project Sampaguita and Fiat, life in all its shadows is beautiful. Daghang salamat kaninyong tanan.
Hi. Maayong buntag Cebu. Good morning. Thank you for coming here, my goodness. How funny, because it's like 2020. Like you said, I'm a writer, I'm an editor, and I'm a depression survivor. I've been a depressive since for 24 years now. And I never would have thought I would see the day I would talk about my illness in front of people I had just met today, because we never talked about it when I was growing up. So thank you. Thank you for affirming my existence. Okay, anyway, I'm here basically to help shuffle events along, but I'm also here to start by telling my story, because like I said, I've been living with this illness for quite a long time. Diagnosed officially, which means I went to a psychiatrist first 24 years ago, but that's not the official, that's the official beginning, because a few years before that, I went to the medicine cabinet, drank 39 Tylenols, I don't know why, and then I went to my friend's house, and then they took me to a small clinic and pumped my stomach. But in those days, we never talked about it after that, why I did that and whatever happened. It remained unaddressed, no? So I lived, went like that. There's some studies that say that you begin with some kind of trauma in your life that triggers depression. It's also genetic. So now in retrospect, I have a brother who passed away already, who I will bet my measly bank account that he was also bipolar, no? But we never addressed it. And then, when my father passed away, things seemed to be that way. No? You start out thinking you're madrama, angst, that's our generation. Now I think it's called hugot, no? For the younger, hugot na siya. Pero it might have been a symptom of something else. And then, in the mid-90s, another trigger event. I was engaged and it fell apart. Don't ask me why anymore, it was his fault. And then, so that triggered something. The doctors here on board will tell you that there are classic symptoms. So I ate myself to 210 pounds, 220 I think. I know I'm not svelte yet, but I was a lot fatter then. So, and I didn't sleep. I hardly slept and I was addicted to sleeping pills. So, well, I like to console myself, we're in good company. Winston Churchill used to call his depression the black dog, always looking over his shoulder. I had a visualization of it as a hollow black, because I would wake up and it would be on my chest. So can you imagine how that feels? Every time you wake up in the morning, you feel like crying within like a minute of waking up because you are not happy you woke up. So I lived with that for quite a while. But I'm a writer, like I said, so that was my solace until one day, and then there's so many other symptoms. You stop caring about your routine, you lose passion. William Styron also wrote about his depression and how it colored the world. Everything had a rust-colored patina, he said. So everything was not colorful anymore. But anyway, so when I stopped being able to write, I knew I needed help. So I went to a doctor for the first time, a psychiatrist, and he put me on medication. Let me get this off the bat. I am an advocate of monitored medication. In other words, don't pop it naman indiscriminately, but don't be afraid of it. Of course, there's so many schools of thought that say it'll fry your brains, it'll get you worse, you know. But the doctors are also saying it's idiosyncratic. We react differently. But I say, depression is, when you're depressive, you have these issues. you cannot look at them straight in the eye because it's painful. So you need a little bit of a buffering, some kind of anesthetic, so you can take the bull by the horns, stare at it, stare at your demons until they're no longer so scary. And then you can start to work them out. That is the role of medication, not to numb you permanently. So I was on medication from about 1996 to 2002, off and on, off and on. There'd be a trigger and I'd have to run again. And then I discovered yoga in 2002. Not so much as a practice, and it's not a religious practice, no? It's an internal practice, but I did not have to sacrifice, humans to a pagan god or anything like that. So I discovered yoga. It gave me some passion. I learned to teach it to people. And for the next 12 years, I was off meds. So kala ko, oh my God, I'm fine, right? So God said, maybe you need a bit of a kick again. So in 2013, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Kaboom! But I applied to my treatment the same diligence I applied to my yoga. So I was focused on getting better. I got better. But believe it or not, I wasn't depressed during the illness. Finally, when everything was fine, when everything was okay, everyone's going, oh my God, you're fine, great, Okay, everybody goes back to life. Thank God, you're fine. And then I'm sitting and wondering what I was going to do with the rest of my life, So I fell into a depression again, and this time it was a different nature. So I was led to a different doctor who herself was a survivor and was able to guide me through the different mechanics that go with that kind of survivorship. So since then, I've been seeing her. Again, it's off and on. It's still living with that kind of, living with the illness. But like I was telling the Fiat ladies, I'm still evolving. Work in progress pa rin ako. So since the last time we talked last September, and then today, things have been happening also. Doctors call them running into a stress wall. So my mother has been ill, and the physical, mental, financial, and psychological stress of that drove me again to almost do something crazy. But through all the years, maybe because I've been living with this illness so much, I've divided my head into places. I think my guardian angel lives here. I don't know why, It's here, right back. And then, so sometimes they're arguing when I freak out over something. And you can freak out for the most illogical reasons when you're depressive. I was telling them I would be parking, and then the watch your car boy would be masungit, and then after a while, I'm crying na. Na-trigger ako. And then this part of my head goes, he hates me, the world hates me. And then my mind is, wait, what's happening? And he goes, oh, just shut up, let me have a breakdown for a while. And then, okay, my popcorn. Baka naman I'm eating. I'm not aware. Hello. Better. There. Is there popcorn? Karkar chicharon, no? Okay. Chicharon, no? Okay. So it would be arguing. I'd be arguing with myself. And then this guardian angel, again, did its job when just a few months ago, I had a mini breakdown. I was almost thinking of killing myself again. And then but they told me, just calm down, call your doctor. So I did. I called her, and that's why I'd be very proud to introduce her later. One of my best friends is in there. And so she dealt with, my doctor called her, she picked me up, checked me into the hospital, and I walked out the next day after being sedated and with a new diagnosis as bipolar. So after 24 years as just depressive, going just one way, I'm now bipolar. I have an up. So I have leveled up. I have evolved. I'm more sophisticated. It's a little more complicated. Are you depressive? No, I'm bipolar. It's different. I saw a t-shirt recently that said, I hate being bipolar. It's awesome. Okay, so it's, you'll find out later, no? But if you're depressive, you go down. If you're bipolar, you have a manic side. It was formerly called manic depressive. The mania doesn't have to be, I'm happy. My mania is, I get really mad. I get really irritated. When my mother was in the hospital and I went down EDSA driving, and I got almost run over by a wang-wang, these motorcycles carrying some anonymous VIP down EDSA. I remember jumping out of the car and all the profanity I could think of. Sorry, Father. And then he was looking at me and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be shot dead in the middle of EDSA. I have to carry my body. Everybody can see me. And the tabloids tomorrow will say, manunulat, binaril sa ano, nagwala sa EDSA, patay. Yan. Yun ang mga headline. So, of course, that wasn't healthy anymore. So, that was the side. So now, so she put me on medication. I'm better now. There's so many aspects to it. Of course, again, it's all these labels. She goes, relax, this one medicine I'm giving you. It's, if you Google it, because I know you're going to Google it, it's going to say antipsychotic, but you're not, really psychotic. But see, it's all of these labels. She's mentally ill. She's depressive. She's bipolar. She's on antipsychotics. My God, I don't want to sit beside her. She'll probably stab me, Things like that. So these are part of these things that we are here to bash, all of the stigma. So, so now I'm going to the lessons I learned from that. And number one is it's an illness, okay? It's pathological. Some of it is genetic, a lot of it is environmental, but it's an illness. So now sometimes I call in and I go, some days I'll call, parang may trangkaso, I won't come into work today. Okay, then a few months later I'll go, I think I'm getting an episode, I can't come to work today. And my boss who understands will go, okay, walk it out or sleep it out. So it's completely legit. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're inferior. It doesn't mean you're a burden to society. It just means you're ill. And like every sickness, it can be addressed. All right? So the more we think about that, the more we learn to accept it as part. It's like having a little less vitamin C than other people. My very first medication was Prozac in those days. It was so strong, I was stoned out of my mind. I couldn't drive for 2 weeks. I was like, it's called the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It stops your happy hormone from being dissipated. So you feel you're getting sad and then boom. So that's how it works. It's a completely chemical thing. So you think it's an illness. In the early days of my depression, during a medical exam, company medical exam, the nurse said to me, Mama, yun, any other medication? Sabi ko, Prozac. And she looks at me like, huwag na natin isulat yun. And sabi ko, bakit? It's one of these things that, and you get you irritated. Why? Does it mean I'm inferior to you because I have a mental illness? Do you have diabetes? Do you have arthritis? We have the same problem. And then now, because I can compare, I had cancer, I had depression, I have depression. So, they're the same thing. They're both life-threatening. They can both be addressed, Lesson number 2, I pray a lot. Because I think studies have also shown that if you believe in something beyond yourself, you realize that, there's some things that you have to, as they say, you have to let it be. The Magnificat is one of my favorite prayers, Be it done to me according to thy word. I am the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done to me according to thy word. I'm not saying you sit down, get the diagnosis, and wait to be saved from your state of depression. Because what I got in my prayer was, okay, you gotta go to the doctor. You have to take this thing into your own hands. You can't be idle. Believe me, I talk to my spiritual directors. I hang around with a lot of Senegal sisters and I go, is this a failure of faith, sister? No. You take it into your own hands and you do what God tells you. You don't sit there and say, if you mean me to be depressed for the rest of my life, I will be. But I don't think He would want us to be like that. And maybe that's why He's making me a functioning depressive, so He can come here and tell you, I'm a functioning depressive. Diba? I don't just stay home and lock myself in the room. So I pray. Part of it is also gratitude. I'm so convinced about it, I had it tattooed on my arm. Everything is a gift. So I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful I'm here. I'm grateful you're listening, and there are a lot of people here. I'm grateful I'm in Cebu, so I'll get the chance to eat all of the food here. I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful we have a good day, that you came here despite the COVID scare. I'm grateful when I find a parking space, that I woke up, that I got a good night's sleep. Little things, and when you add them up, you're like grateful. It might not, gratitude, somebody said, This illness is scary. It can be very powerful, and all the thinking in the world might not be able to help you when you're in a bad state. But when you're thinking straight, like I am today, buti na lang, you list down what you're thankful for, and it helps you look at things differently. It helps you realize that my life is on loan. Why should I spend it miserable? No? If there are ways that I can be happy and help other people. So pray, and then most important for me is that we're all here. I'm so happy. It's unprecedented in the history of the Philippines and the world that we are talking about mental illness with such openness. We're actually talking about it. We're talking about people being depressive and not whispering anymore. This comes at a huge price. And later when you listen to Sheila Suntay, who lost her son, we'll realize how big that price has been. It's cost families. It's destroyed a lot of families. It's ripped out hearts. But because of that sacrifice, I think we're all here talking about it. So I'm just saying, by the grace of God and by our own will, we can keep looking at this illness like any demon, take it by the horns, look at it until it's no longer scary. It doesn't scare anybody anymore. Okay? Let's just keep it in its place, and then we can help people, we can help ourselves. Help yourself before you help other people, or we can just all do this together and then be completely productive and happy. It's possible to be happy when you're depressive. That's another thing. Never be happy again. It's not true. In fact, your happiness gets a deeper element when you realize how fragile it is. By the grace of God, let's look at it and let's not be afraid of it anymore. Thank you. That's my story. So I will now segue to my other job. That's why I'm getting multiple personality also. I have to play host also. No. So we will invite up one of the doctors who's accompanied us, now becoming a good friend of ours. So Dr. Robert Bonaventura, our first speaker, is a consultant psychiatrist at the UERM Hospital and currently chief of the section of psychiatry at the MTC College of Medicine. He finished his BS majoring in psychology, magna cum laude at FEU, the Far Eastern University. He took up and finished medicine at the UERM Memorial Medical Center College of Medicine, had his postgraduate training in psychiatry of old age at the New South Wales Institute of Psychiatry in Sydney, Australia. So as you can see, we're so happy there's lots of young people here. So you're not, you're not exempted no matter what age you are. There's so many issues if you're a teenager, if you're an adult, and if you're also an aging person. There's so many issues. But he can show us exactly what the symptoms are. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Robert Buenaventura. Hello.
Thank you. Mabuhay yung Tagulong Tanan. First of all, I'd like to thank, not just thank, but commend as well the ladies of Fiat and Project Sampaguita for this major activity. It's awesome to be here and seeing so many people here this morning. It's the biggest audience that we've had so far. This is our third leg of our tour. I mean, I don't know what we call it, but this is the third time we're doing this. And the reason I'm thanking them is because as a psychiatrist, what we can do is very limited in terms of, for example, information dissemination. So opportunities like this are welcome to us, so that's why we participate, because it helps us to at least talk a little bit more about mental health, mental illness, and hopefully be able to bring across to you more information or better information about this situation. Next slide, please. So I'm here basically to give you a situationer about mental health in the Philippines, just a brief one, because that by itself is a very complex topic. So the other speakers for the rest of this morning's session will give you a little bit more detail. So mine is primarily, so we say, a bird's eye view, or a general perspective. And I'll be focusing primarily on anxiety, depression, and suicide. Next slide. Okay. So this would be the outline of my presentation. This is what I'm going to discuss in the next 20 minutes, hopefully. And I'm sorry if you will not be able to see some of the slides, part of the slides because of we have shares. Okay, next slide. So when we talk about mental health, it's basically a state of well-being. So when we talk about well-being, it's for example, the ability of the individual to realize his potential, to be able to cope with the normal stresses of life. So I'd like to emphasize the word normal, because if it's extraordinary, it's supernormal, then it's understandable if there are times that we are unable to deal with this. Okay? And then be able to work productively and fruitfully. This was mentioned by Alia earlier. And then finally, be able to contribute to our communities and society in general. So if we have all this, or most of this in general, then we can say we're in a state of well-being. The World Health Organization has defined health basically as the ability to have psychological, biological, and social well-being. So if you look at the definition, biopsychosocial, that means to have health, all three must be present. So that means if you take out mental health in that situation, then there is no health. And later on, Dr. Banal will be one of our speakers will be talking about this a little bit more. Next slide, please. A few decades ago, an American psychiatrist by the name of George Engel came up with a biopsychosocial perspective of health and disease. The reason for that is because when he started to practice, he noted that doctors and healthcare workers in general tended to focus only on the biological or physiological aspects of the individual, of the patient, to the neglect of the psychological and social components. So what he did was to look at this more seriously, more in-depth, and then he came up with the proposition that to look at a patient, to look at not just the patient, but in terms of health and disease as well, we need to consider not just the biological aspects, but the psychological and social aspect as well. Because the two other factors, psychological and social, will have a significant impact, both positive and negative, in terms of how well an individual deals with the disease that he or she may have. So for example, if you're psychologically healthy, if you have good emotional and personal and social support, then that can help you deal with your medical illness in a much better way. So what he emphasized, and this became the paradigm subsequently in terms of how doctors would look at patients, he emphasized that let's not just look at the physical, but the psychological and social as well. Next slide, please. At about the same time, a Filipino neuropsychiatrist by the name of Dr. Jaime Zaguirre, who was our forerunner, who established the Department of Psychiatry at the University of the East, Ramon Magsaysay Memorial Medical Center, where I graduated from. He expanded it a bit. He included the spiritual component. And in his paradigm, if you look at his diagram, he put the spirit or logos on top. So that means it's more important than the mind and the body. Okay? So Dr. Engel looked at the biopsychosocial aspect. Dr. Zaguirre looked at it from a different perspective, including the spiritual aspect of the individual. Next slide, please. So this would be the components of the individual human person. Now let's segue to what we are seeing globally. So ito na yung a little bit more detail as far as the situation of mental health in the overall first, globally, and then later on I'll segue into a little bit more detail about what we're seeing in our country. So, according to the WHO again, there are very limited number of human resources. So that means these are healthcare workers who are focused on mental health, including psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and other, including social workers as well. So, it's about 1%. So the estimate is only about 1% of all healthcare workers are focused on helping individuals with mental health conditions. So that's not a huge number. And then the financial investment of countries worldwide is also relatively small compared to investments in other forms of diseases. And if you look at the right side of the screen, the number of beds allocated for patients with mental health also much smaller, 5 compared to 15. That's the reason why outpatient resources are so heavily burdened, because they cannot get into the hospital, so they end up clogging outpatient clinics or consultations, because that's more often than not, because those are the only resources available to them. And then finally, at the bottom, and this is an aspect that at least I'm happy about, because when we started talking about this, one reason that we were sort of somewhat dissatisfied in terms of mental health in our country was because we didn't have a mental health law. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about this, because about half of the countries worldwide still don't have any clear policies or laws about mental health in their respective countries. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's globally. Now let's look at what's happening in the Philippines. The topmost slide on your left, the number of professionals working on mental health in our country. There are more than 100 million Filipinos. Okay. And how many psychiatrists are there in the country? Less than 700. Cebu province has a population of almost 3 million. And I'm glad to see one of our psychiatrist colleagues here, Dr. Edwin Menguito of the Vicente Soto Memorial Medical Center. And Dr. Menguito, there are only less than 20 psychiatrists in Cebu. So less than 20 psychiatrists in Cebu, serving a population of almost 3 million. Okay. So what do you do then if then you need to look for other alternatives. So fortunately, we will have other mental health care workers like nurses, psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors, okay? And then over there, as you can see, only 5% of the total health budget of the Department of Health is allocated towards mental health, so relatively small. Although small from our perspective, we would want more, of course, but it's somewhat at par in terms of what we see with other countries as well. And then finally, mental health facilities. So here in Cebu, we only have Vicente Soto, although there would be, of course, private healthcare facility, mental health care facilities. But as far as government facilities would be concerned, there's only primarily one. And if you're looking at mental health care workers in the Philippines, only two serving a population of 100,000. So only 2 mental health care workers serving a population of 100,000 people. So it's really very small. I just wanted to emphasize that, because the highest risk that we will see would be, as I mentioned, in the younger adults. So that means the more senior members of the community, the family, the community, the school, should be more vigilant. Okay.
I'm very happy to introduce this next speaker. Kathy Babao is an author, a columnist, an artist, and a grief coach. She has written 4 books on loss and bereavement, one of which won a National Book Award. It's not here, but 21 years ago, she also lost her son to illness. Miggy, he was 4 years old. And I admire her a lot because instead of wallowing, she channeled her grief into forming Miggy's Corner. It's a corner in some hospitals in Manila where kids can read, sick children can read and play while waiting for treatment. And for that effort, she won a Towns Award for community service. She's also a Reader's Digest Everyday Hero Award. She writes a column for the paper where I also work, the Philippine Daily Inquirer. And she has a private practice on grief coaching in Manila. And I would be the one to recommend because she helped me. She quite possibly saved my life. So she knows all the right things to say if you're feeling suicidal or if you are somebody who has lost a loved one. So listen to her. Anyway, so here's my friend. That's her best qualification. No? Here's my friend, Kathy Babao.
My buntag. Ayo ang buntag, right? So, I'm very happy to be here. My roots are from Mandaue, so it makes me doubly happy to be here. So, I'm going to talk about grief, no? As you noticed, death or the loss of a loved one is a running theme in our forum. Dr. Buenaventura cited that when you lose a loved one to death, it can be a possible trigger for depression. Alia earlier mentioned that her dad, the loss of her dad, probably impacted her own mental wellness journey. Sheila, who will speak after me, also, like me, lost a son, although hers is much more recent. I lost my son 21 years ago. Okay, so among losses through death, it's been mentioned earlier, we talked about suicide. Suicide is one of the most difficult, okay, losses that any family can experience. Okay? The suddenness, the social stigma that surrounds it complicates the grief further. So I'm here to give you 5 points. If you know someone who has lost a loved one through suicide, or even not suicide, no, you can use these points if you want to. Because the best thing that we can do for people who have lost loved ones is to support them. Okay, so the very first one I'd like to emphasize is presence. Okay, presence is very important. You need to be there for your friend. Sometimes there are no need for words. No, you just have to be there. Just show up. No, because sometimes what we say might not even be helpful and might even cause further harm. Okay? I would advise that you would check in on your friends or your family members or relatives ever so often. No? Sometimes when people are newly bereaved, they would like to keep to themselves. They like to cocoon. So check in on them after 3 months, after 6 months, whenever there is something major that happens. Let's say it's the birthday of the loved one, or it's a wedding anniversary. Because if you're friends, diba, you would most often remember, birthday ni like this, or anniversary, or Christmas, or Valentine's, Mother's Day, Father's Day. All of those are potential triggers. Okay, and it's important that we give them the space to grieve. No? You have to give them time and space. Most often, they don't like to go out. They don't want to talk, especially if they're newly bereaved. So please, more so with suicide, do not ask questions, okay? Especially the specifics, unless they volunteer the story or unless they volunteer the details. Please refrain from asking them, because it's, you're putting them in a very awkward position, and because you know that suicide carries a very strong stigma, it just adds to their burden, it just adds to their sadness if you ask them what happened, or if you relate to them information that, hey, I heard like this. If it's not validated, then no need to share the information. Please refrain from saying, okay, and this is so common, no? Moingon ta, naka-recover ka na? Okay, please let's not do that. It's not a very helpful question. Or naka-move on ka na? Okay, anybody who has been through a loss knows that that kind of statement can be very hurtful. No? Because like I said, grief is an individual journey. One family can experience the same death. Let's say siblings, no? They lose their mother. That's the only thing that's common. It stops there. The experience of losing the mother. But each child will have a different way of coping, because each child had a different relationship with their mom. No? If there is a surviving spouse, then the husband will also grieve the mother in a different way. Okay? So the silent, non-judgmental presence of friends or family is the most helpful thing on the road to healing. Okay? Friends who patiently listen to the stories as they are told over and over again. Okay? It can be paulit-ulit. No? They like to tell the story from time to time, and you can be a good friend and a good support if you just sit there and listen. Friends who allow us to weep, no? To cry, and to unburden. I encourage tears. No? There's nothing wrong with tears. It's so important to let your tears out of your system. It's cleansing. It's good for the soul. Because it's like, I like to use the analogy of the bucket. Imagine a wooden bucket, okay, filling up with water. If you don't take out the water from time to time, what will happen to the bucket? Maunsa man ang bucket? Ang ilalom. Di ba mabungkag? the bottom will fall out if you don't take out the water. So it's the same thing with crying. So allow yourselves to cry, allow your friends and your loved ones to cry. Last point, let's not give unsolicited advice. Okay? It's not helpful, it's not necessary. The best thing that you can do for your friends, if you truly care for them, is to, number one, of course, is to pray for them, to pray with them, and to bear witness to their pain. Okay? Sometimes, I see this in my practice, they'll say, I really cannot pray. And sometimes some of them even turn away from the Lord for a while. Then you can just say, okay, I understand, no judgment. I will sit with you and I will continue to pray for you. You cannot force them, you cannot force your opinions on them, because our role really is not to judge. No? There is no comparison. Grief is not a contest. You can say na, oh me, I was okay after 2 years. How come it's been 2.5 years with you and you still seem to have not moved on, right? It's not a contest. Okay, so each one will walk at her own or his or her own timetable and time frame. The important thing that you need to remember for yourselves and for others is that as long as you are not harming yourselves or you are not hurting the ones who depend on you, then the time, let them grieve, allow yourselves to grieve and mourn at your own pace. Basta no harm to self and no harm to others. Okay. In the Bible, for me, the 3 most powerful words are where it says, and Jesus wept. Okay, so, if Jesus himself could weep, then how much more tayo, no? We should be free to mourn with others, free to grieve ourselves. With support, grief can be a transformative experience. No loss, when you experience a loss, your life will never return to normal. Okay? That's when it becomes problematic. You say, oh, I want my life to just return to normal. You have to remember that hindi na no? Hindi rin na dyan siya mabalik sa normal. I mean, you have to create your new normal. No? It's a new life without the one who has gone on or without the one who died. There's a lot of good that can come out of grief. I know that sounds strange, but yes, there is good that can come out of grief. And Alga's story and Sheila's story will show you that. Okay? I would like to end with a quote from Lucy Kalanithi. Okay? Si Lucy Kalanithi is a doctor in the US. Her husband wrote the best-selling book, When Breath Becomes Air. Paul Kalanithi was a doctor who wrote about his process of dying. No? It's a very, very powerful book. If you have not read it, I suggest you do. So Lucy said this about her husband's. Imagine they were together for a long time, they got married, and then I think when she was pregnant, she found out that her husband's cancer was, inoperable and terminal. So imagine that, being young, newly married, and pregnant, and finding out that your husband's cancer is inoperable. So she said, being human doesn't happen despite suffering. It happens within it. So whatever it is, whether it is mental illness in the family or whether it is loss in the family, remember there is a reason for that. So Lucy says, when we approach suffering together, when we choose not to hide from it, our lives do not diminish. No? Our lives instead expand. Okay? And to end on that note, the lady after me, the speaker after me, is a perfect example of that. No?
Grabe, ganda pala at mga gwapong mga Cebuano. So many beautiful faces. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Fiat and Project Sampaguita for putting this event together. It's you're doing something really good for the Cebuanos.
Okay, so let me start by letting you know, para lang you know also what to expect from me, no?
I'm not a doctor. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to share on stage here is totally far from what Dr. Bonaventura shared earlier, or what you will be hearing from Dr. Banaag. Totally far, because I am not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm no counselor, I'm no therapist. I'm not one who has been diagnosed with a condition, nor am I a caregiver. In other words, wala naman akong alam sa mental health. Yun naman yung totoo. Ayoko magpanggap eh. I'm not one who is knowledgeable with mental health. I'm just learning it recently, bits and pieces of it. But despite my background, I want you to know that I am a mental health advocate. And I'm not your ordinary advocate. I'm a very, very strong one, ready to face society head on until they accept us and hear our cry. So strong of an advocate I am that I go from one university to another, public, private, it doesn't matter. I move. I went to Baguio, 4 hours going to Baguio, 5 hours pabalik kasi nabutan ako ng traffic. I spent 9 hours on the road just to give a 30-minute talk. Not to this kind of a crowd, just to see 120 students. Week after that, I went to La Union. Ganun din. 3 hours biyahe going there, 4 hours pabalik, 7 hours on the road for a 30-minute talk, or even a smaller crowd, just 80 children. But it doesn't matter. I go out of my way, I inconvene myself. Why? I want to share with you, not so long ago, I'm sure all of you here are familiar with the story of Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, you know, all these Disney characters. I was just a young girl. I've always felt and believed. Daddy's girl kasi ako eh, so pinalaki akong parang prince. Kunyari princess. You know, where you're a little girl, and you have all these teacups, and then you dress up with this mga bouffant dresses. My mom would take me to this dressmaker na, sa tabi-tabi lang naman, they would have, we're 5 girls, and we would always have these dresses made. We were raised like princesses, because that's how my dad wanted to treat us. Growing up, I told myself, one day I'll become a true-to-life princess. So there you have it. I went to an all-girls school, Assumption, in Manila. You know, all my friends at age 15 or 16, yan na yung high school mo kasi, di ba? At high school, you're starting to prepare for college and you start dreaming. All my friends wanted to be, nag-ambisyon na, maglalasal ako kasi I'm going to be a CPA. Yung iba, ako hindi. I'm going to be a businesswoman, so I'm entering Ateneo. Yung iba, I'm going to be a doctor, UP ako. You know, I didn't even bother applying for any of those schools. UP Ateneo Lasal, I didn't even bother applying. Kasi alam ko babagsak ako, hindi naman papasaya. I did a dream. I wanted to be a wife and mother. At age 16, I already knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be a wife, I wanted to be a mom, and I wanted to have 5 kids. End of story. That was it. But that's the problem, you know, pag hindi ka nag-ambition, you don't want to study anymore. So I partied. I would drink with friends. At age 30, tinuturuan ko lang yung mga kapatid ko manigarilyo. Kung ano namang kalokohan ginawa ko. But that was long time ago. I'm a good girl now. Para sa mga. Mabait na ako. So that was my life before, no? That was all I ever wanted. So come college, I went to St. Benilde. Yun naman kaya ko ipasa at that time because my grades were really not so good. I met my husband today. My husband's my first boyfriend and I ended up marrying him. Oy, wow. Diba? Totoo yung forever ha? Sino mo naniniwala sa forever? Ay, ang konti. Maniwala kayo sa forever. It's true. Si Mami ba kayo naniwala eh? Maniwala kayo sa forever. It's true. Ang sarap ka in love. I've been married for 21 years and I love it. I love it. Yeah. Sabi ko sa inyo, princess ako eh. Talaga nagkatotoo yung gusto ko. That's all I ever wanted. I wanted 5 kids and I wanted to get married. I wanted to be a housewife. So here comes my Prince Charming, who is my opposite. Guwapo. Kamukha ni Aga mo. I'll show you the photo later. Baka mainit kayo. Kamukha ni Aga. Well, medyo matabali siya ngayon. Kaya mapati kamukha ni si Aga. So anyway, back then, I was only 21 or 22. My husband, my boyfriend back then, no? Very studious. Very studious. Siya yung palagi nag-aaral, palagi nasa dean's list, palagi nasa honor. Ako yung opposite niya, ako yung bagsakan niya. Back then, he was already in law school and he was about to take the bar exam. So we were in his house, aral ng aral, ayaw niya ako kausapin. He was so busy studying, I said, was making him gulo, I said, "Hon, you're about to take the bar exam." Nakikilig ako. Mag-aasawa na ba tayo pag pumasa ka? Kasi, ganyan ka lang, kinikilig pa din ako, ganyan naman ako. Kasi I wanna get married na, I don't wanna have 5 kids. So he looked at me, sabi niya, paano mo plano pakainin yung 5 kids? Sabi ko, I don't know with you, basta I want 5 kids, that's your problem. Diba? Kasi when you're young, hindi mo iniisip yan eh. Hindi mo iniisip, kailangan pala pakainin itong mga bata. Akala ko, maglalaro lang tayo, hindi pala, no? So, kailangan pala pag-aralin. So, I did not think of that. I was so innocent, walang kaalam lang sa buhay. And he said, 5 kids ka dyan. Ako naman naiinis kasi that's what I wanted. Talagang sabi ko, hindi ako nag-aaral eh, kasi gusto ko na mag-graduate. Pinilit ko lang nga mag-graduate para lang masabi sa daddy ko, yan yung diploma, mag-aasawa na ako. Ganun lang. So, I looked at him and I said, well, it doesn't have to be you. Kung ayaw mo, anyone, I will look for someone else who will cooperate to make 5 kids. Yabang, alam mo naman, naka-jackpot na nga ako sa asawa ko. So, fast forward, I fulfilled the dream. I married my husband. Yes, he is a lawyer today, but he's not a practicing lawyer. As a matter of fact, back then, hindi naman siya nag-abogado because he wanted to be a lawyer. He had no plans of making money in being a lawyer. He wanted to be in Congress. He wanted to create laws for the people. He has always believed that those who have less in life must have more in terms of law. He is now in Congress. He is the congressman of the 4th District of Quezon City. Kaya sabi ko sa inyo, kung princess at princess lang, grabe, parang na-achieve ko na lahat. My life was so perfect. Everything I ever wanted in life, even my husband's dream, na-achieve. So, I told myself, I am so blessed already. Can I just show my 5 kids? Gusto ko lang magyabang. Ganda, no? Bawal pangit sa amin. Lahat gwapo, ganda. Even more blessed I am because my stepdaughter, Nikki, already got married 2 years ago. She's married to JB. So now I even have a son-in-law. Now I have 6 kids. Grabe, diba? I have more than just a basketball team. And I'll tell you how perfect my family is. Wait lang, when I say perfect, I don't mean na hindi kami nag-aaway, everyday happy. No, of course not. Perfect in the sense that even the challenges that came into my life came at the right time, at the right place. Yung suwabe lang, yung everyday problems lang na ang dali-dali naman to deal with. It wasn't like as if headache na ako. No, my problems were very easy. It wasn't, I had problems with my husband, of course. I had problems with my children. Minsan, pag sasagutin ka na, nainis. Mga ganun lang. It wasn't like the kind of headache that you see in teleserye movies na nagsasampalan na yung mag-ina. No, I don't have those. My children are mababait na mga anak ko. All of them are godly. I raised them to be compassionate, kind people. My other daughter, Chloe, used to even lead her Bible class when she was 13 years old in Poveda. So mag-iimbita siya mga friends siya, pakakainin ko ng McDonald's, Jollibee sa sponsor ko, tapos she would teach the Word of God. That was my life. And to show you how perfect my family, was, Nikki, my stepdaughter, is the daughter of my husband, obviously with his ex-girlfriend now. Alam mo yung mommy niya is very, very close to me. Modern family kami. I'm so close to her mom. My husband is so close to the husband now of his ex-girlfriend. Lumalabas kami, we go drinking together, we travel together. As a matter of fact, some kids kasi parang better sila pag dalawa family, di ba? Parang may favoritism, ganyan. My stepdaughter always felt she was more blessed pa nga than my children kasi she has 2 families. She is so close to her siblings. She takes care of everybody. Pag wala kami nagbabiyahe, she takes care of everybody. That's how close my kids are. So I always thought, grabe, wala na ito pa-perfect sa family ko, parang modern family. And I show na the next slide. Gwapo yung asawa ko, walang hihirin. That's yan lang. Pero nung payat yan, nung chiseled agamula. Ngayon, basta gwapo siya. So this is now my whole family. Nikki, me, Zara, Chloe, my husband, JB, my son-in-law, Benzo, he's turning 23 this May, and that's my youngest son, Jaime, he's 15 years old. That's the perfect. The perfect family I raised. Where all my sweat and blood went, because this isn't just a family, it's my ultimate dream. And you know, when you achieve a family like this, you do not think something tragic will ever happen to you. Right? Perfect na eh. And I picked up a call one day, April 21, 2018. A day I will never forget. Because it brought so much pain into our lives. So there was my helper. There was my helper who was There was my helper on the phone. She was yelling, crying. Hindi ko maintindihan sinasabi niya. All I could understand was, Ma'am, uwi na kayo, Ma'am, uwi na kayo. And I kept asking, what happened? What happened? She didn't want to say. And you know, ang dali sabihin, nag-away kasi sila, or Ma'am, may nalaglag sa hagdan, or whatever. Diba? It would have been easier, but she did not want to say it. And that's where the problem is. When your helper does not want to do it. When your helper doesn't want to talk, you know in your heart, you just lost a son. Because she kept saying, Mom, si Renzo, si Renzo. So I said, Yaya, ano ba? I was so angry, I was so anxious. You know, I just said, ano ba? Ano ba nangyari? Humihinga pa ba? Yun na lang, sagutin mo na lang, humihinga pa ba? She said, hindi na. I lost my son to depression, April 21, 2018. A sickness I knew nothing about. I did not even know it existed in my board. Wala akong alam. Except that photo that you saw, that was just taken 2 weeks prior to the time that it happened. We were in the circle, we were so happy, snowball, snow fight. You know what you see in the movies? That was my family. As a matter of fact, there was one part in that trip I vividly remember. My husband rented an old glass house. Hindi na kami lumalabas kasi ang ganda po snow, makikita mo eh. We were playing board games. You know how children are today, wala na ginawa kundi mag-cellphone na mag-cellphone. That was one time I did not see my kids in cell phones. They were fully present in time. We were playing board games, and then their dad, my husband, was cheating sa Scrabble eh. Nanalo yung asawa ko, so lahat sila. Parang, it's what you see in the movies. They were pillow fighting, niloloko nila dad nila, cheater, nagtatawanan, we were drinking, we were having fun. And I remember I sat back on the couch and I was just looking at my family and I was thanking God. Sabi ko, God, I've always dreamt of this family, bata pa ako. I used to watch this in the movies. Yung happy family, yung nagtatawanan, pillow fight. Pero yung movie, acting yun eh. I had this under my eyes. I was looking at a family that I always dreamed of. So I said, where did this happen? Kasi when I saw him in the bathroom, he pulled the trigger. He used a shotgun to take his life. I was so puzzled. Saan galing to? Where did this happen? To those of you who are wondering why my child even had a gun, because yun yung problema pag suicide, the parents get judged immediately. Dami mong manilinig. Bakit kasi binigyan ng baril? Bata-bata pa. Hindi ko namin siya binigyan ng baril. My son always excelled in sports. You know, at I think 15 years old, he came to nung bata kasi yan, he used to be bullied in Lasal. That was the whole story. Bakit siya may baril? He used to be bullied in Lasal. He was a kid. He went to a fair. Pag uwi sa bahay, I was asking him what happened to the money I gave you. Give me the change, give me the receipt, let's make an accounting. You know, just like any parent, you train your children to hold money. Umiiyak siya, tumutulong na luwa. I said, baby, what happened? He said, some big guys from school, mga high school yata, who was just a kid, tied him up in Lasal, in a tree, took his wallet, threw it to his face, got all the money. Wala lang siya makuwi sa akin. Because of that incident, my husband was so angry. Of course, we dealt with the school, we dealt with the parents, so but never mind that. We wanted now to teach our child how to fight. So in-enroll namin sa Taekwondo. I did not know in that 6 years that he was at Taekwondo, he never liked the sport pala. Feeling niya pinilit namin. But we were explaining to him, we never forced you. We wanted to instill those skills in you. So if something happens, you know how to fight. So nung nag-black belter na siya, napasok na siya ng Philippine team, ganun siya kagaling. That's how good he is in sports. He made it to the Philippine team. Nilagay na yan, ayaw pa niya ng sport ha. He told us eventually, and he said, Mom, I'm graduating already. Ayaw ka na mag-taekwondo. So kami naman, okay, you already excelled in it, so what do you want to do? I want to do shooting. No, of course not. I don't know of any mom who will say yes to shooting. Eh, binaypas ako, lumapit sa daddy. Apparently yun din ang dream ng asawa ko, mag-shooting. Hindi pumayag. So I said, the deal is, because nag-usap na kayo, you never bring home the gun. My husband was shooting for like 5 or 6 years. He made it to the Philippine team. Alam mo, sobrang galing ng anak ko, he actually even beat Richard Gomez. Na at that time, wala pa sa Philippine team yung anak ko, ha? That was how good he was in shooting. He would travel worldwide. He would compete from Italy to Germany to Korea to Hong Kong, kung saan-saan siya umaabot. The Prince of Dubai would send him invitations, all expenses paid. Wala lang. Gusto lang niya ng kalaro sa shooting. That's how good my son was. That's why he had access to a gun. He did not own one. It was not under his name. As a matter of fact, his whole life, he never brought home the gun. I know because I would go with him in his practice. Sa alabang, he would put it back sa locker, he would unload, clean, put it back sa locker. Of course, we'd check the CCTV that day. He brought it home. Hindi namin alam. Bit-bit na pala niya. I struggled so much with my faith in God. So much. Sabi ko nga sa kanya, I used to lead a Bible class. Why would God choose me of all people? Sana yung hindi na lang nagdadasal. Sana yung kung sino yung Antichrist na lang. But why me? You know, I struggled so much. So much so that during my eulogy, I was prepared. I was going to go against God and I was going to tell all my viewers, one day your bubble is going to pop like me. He's not going to show up and then you will realize, he doesn't exist pala. I was ready to say that. But you know, my prayer partner came the day before I gave the eulogy, she said, yes, he sent me here. She came to the wake and sabi ko, who? Sabi niya, God brought me here. Chopper ka. I was angry eh. Diba? Naka-Benz ka ba? Yung lumilipad na may pakpak na Benz? And sabi niya, feels that let's not do this. Sabi ko, do what? He took my son without any heads up. You want me to believe that he exists? The God I know doesn't do that. And then she said, well, I just want to show you something. He sent me here. He's got a message for you. Sabi ko, okay, let's hear it. So she showed me, I don't know if you've tried using Grab. May Grab ba dito sa Cebu? And anyway, sa Manila may Grab kasi. And my friends would say na pag tumatawag na sila ng Grab taxi, any car could pick you up. Any caller, any brand, basta any car. So this is the car that picked her up. Let me show the big number, okay? So it says GOD 529. You know, I run a cab company. I'm a businesswoman. I have my own taxi company in Manila. We have 500 taxis. After my son passed on, nung when we put him to peace, inaayos na namin siya. I was in my office, I was going through the registration of every single cab I have in all 500 taxis. Wala akong makuhang plate number that starts with G. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm sure may mga G dyan sa labas. I'm just saying, mahirap maghanap ng G. Very common is D, very common is C. H and M, very common. G, wala talaga masyado. O wala pa ako makikita, at least in my cab, no? Or when I go out, I've been trying to look for a G. Wala akong makitang G. What more the word God? Pero galit pa ako na niya. So I said, ano ngayon kung God nakalagay dyan? I'm sure paglabas ko dito, may God pa ako makikita dyan. And she said, well, yeah, maybe madaming God. But the 529, let's look into the deeper meaning. My prayer partner used the Strong Concordance Bible. It's not the regular Bible. Strong Concordance is what the Vatican uses. That's the Bible that they use. So she looked up the meaning of 529, the Greek meaning, and it says faithfulness. So GOD 529 means God is faithful. Sabi ko, magaling. He took my son, broke my whole family, and you want me to believe he is faithful? She said, yes. Because this is just a Greek meaning. There is a Hebrew meaning to 529. Let's show the Hebrew meaning. The act or reception of meeting a newly arrived official. God meets a newly arrived official. He did not say, God meets a new boy or a kid on the block. He called my son an official. And you know, let's go back to the plate number, please. To prove that this message is for me, yun nga, if you call Grab, any car can pick you up. Honda, I don't know, Vios, Nissan, any car, any brand. It was a Suzuki. Why kaya? Bakit Suzuki? Tapos may S sa gitna. My name is Sheila, my last name is Suntay. S is my initial. Coincidence, no? Parang hindi pa din. Y, S, God, 529. Parang, baka coincidence lang, pero hindi eh. 5 in terms of months is May, right? 29 minus 5 is 24. That is my son's birthday, May 24. That S font sa baba, Suzuki eh. So may S sa baba, it's color red. That is the font and the color that my husband has been using in politics for 20 years now. It's the exact same font, exact same color. This message was for me. I'm sharing this with you because I want all of you to understand that in dark times, painful times, you might be struggling with God. I'm sure you do. Back in the Bible, even Noah, even Elijah struggled with God. But you know, He's always there. And for those people who ask me, where was God when your son died? He was right in the exact same place where He was when Jesus died. He never left my son. My son was in extreme pain. My son was very, very spiritual. He prayed a lot. Mahilig mag-retreat yung anak ko. I know for a fact he asked help from God. Took him in, took out his pain, gave him everlasting peace. Something I could never have given him. So that's the reason why I'm sharing it with you. Let's go back, fast forward to the phases of depression. Okay, I want to show this to you. This is what depression looks like. Exactly what depression, all of these, if you know them, are suicidal. Well, they died by suicide. It's a common phase that people show. My son had this the whole time. There was no trace of depression. He hid it so well. So I'm sharing this because I think we have to be more vigilant, more mindful now. Especially when they start opening up. You know, the nice thing is more and more people are coming out in the open. More and more people now are reaching out. So if you are dealing with a friend or a family member who is depressed and then you still see these faces, please always check in. Doesn't mean just because they're smiling and happy they're okay. Because probably chances are they're not. Look at the next slide. Try to understand and not judge. Because depression is not sadness. Second thing. Let's not take it lightly. So I want to discuss this with you, no? Suicide versus suicidal. Because it's very common these days. Pag suicide, it's considered a tragedy, right? The problem is, pag suicidal, we don't want to take it seriously. Sinasabi natin nag-iinarte, AST ka lang. Pag suicide, everybody's present. You know, during the wake of my son, punong-puno every day around the clock. The place was just so full. And it made me wonder, when he was suicidal pa lang, sabi ng mga friends ng anak ko, kasi ita sabi niya, huwag ko sasabihin eh. Hindi mo nga sinabi, nasa na siya ngayon. Diba? Hindi nga kayo magkaaway, pero nasa na siya. You know, if you're worried na mag-aaway kayo, that's okay. Kami nga mag-asawa, nag-aaway din eh. Ibabati din kami, magkapatid nag-aaway, eh lalo na kayo magkaibigan lang. That's normal. But you mature. You mature from it. You know, when I was young, I was smoking at 13, but I quit. I don't smoke anymore. When I was smoking, sinumbong ako ng friend ko sa mami ko, yung anak mo nagka-cut classes na naninigarilyo pa because she loved me. But of course, at that age, you don't look at it that way. Feeling mo, asang bungera ka, hindi kita kaibigan. You're not loyal to me. We fought 3 years kami hindi nag-usap. Today, ninang siya ng anak ko. Yeah, after a while, you mature eh. So never, huwag na naisipin yung mag-aaway kami magagalit. At least buhay. Diba? You need to seek help. Ask for help. We are teaching the children now to open up. If you are on the other side, you are the one that is suffering from depression and you are scared to talk about it, please do not be scared. Everybody's welcoming it now. It is not a big deal anymore. Di ba pag masakit ang ngipin nyo, ganito yan eh. Pag masakit ang ngipin nyo, tatawag kayo sa friend nyo. Or sino dentist nyo, sakit ng teeth ko, so who can I go to kaya? Kasi sabihin ng friend mo. Or si doctor, ganito, puntaan mo, magaling yan, siya kang linis ng clinic. Talaga, nasan yung clinic niya? O, dito lang ganyan, tapos agad ng clinic niya, may TV pa. You know, before you know it, you have a full-blown conversation on a toothache. If you have a broken heart, if you are going through some mental condition, di pag-usapan natin, ano ngayon? Let's talk about it like you're talking about a toothache, like a knee pain. It's normal. Wala nang big deal eh. And it doesn't mean just because you're talking about it, there's something wrong with you now or ayoko na kita kaibigan. Especially nowadays, there's nothing to be ashamed of, ha? We are all talking about it openly. It's not a big deal. The friends of my son are also suffering from depression now. That's why I need to address this. If yung kaibigan nyo, yung kamag-anak nyo, pag hindi nyo tinulungan at tinuloy niya yan, you are going to fall into depression eventually. You will be carrying the guilt. So save yourself too. And to those children who are battling with suicide, keep fighting. If you think that you are a burden to your parents, you know what, kids? There is no way you can ever be a burden to us. Regardless of what problem you will give us parents, you will never be a burden. Eh, anak namin kayo eh. It is our job to help you get over your challenges in life. And guess what? Pag na-solve na natin yung problema ninyo, the next day may problema ulit kayo. Ganun talagang buhay. It's okay. Problems are not supposed to make you weak. They're supposed to make you stronger. So you never, ever give a permanent solution to a temporary situation. You don't do that. You are not eliminating your chances of getting worse. You are eliminating your chances of getting better and having a better life. You took it out of your... Sayang. Gaganda na yung buhay niyo, tinanggal niyo pa. Diba? So let's move to the next slide. These are the worst things you can ever say to somebody who is depressed. Kasi common to eh. You just need to give yourself a kick in the rear. No one ever said life was fair. There are a lot of people worse than you. Alam mo yung pangatlong yan, very common. People always compare. May lalaban. You know, I have a problem. May utang ako dito, 500 pesos. Hindi ko lang kung saan kukunin yung pera ko. 500 pesos lang, nadidepress ka na. Ako nga, wala nga akong makain. Yung mami ko nga naglalabag. Ito, ganyan. Hindi ko lang. Don't compare your situation to theirs. If somebody drowns in 10 feet, and somebody drowns in 30 feet, parehong patay lang yan. Nagkaiba lang sa depth ng tubig, but they are both dead. Same thing with depression. Your problem may be different from theirs, but the depth of pain for the other one who has less of a problem could be deeper than yours. Let us not belittle them and let us not compare ourselves. That's very common eh. Pag nag-open up na, then you start talking about yourself and your problems na mas malaki nga sa'yo and you're not like them. Let's welcome them. Welcome their problem. Let's hear them out. Let's empathize. Well, everyone gets depressed sometimes. My goodness, please do not say that. Maybe you should take vitamins for your stress. Or you just need a hobby. Keep yourself busy. Just put yourself together. Try a little harder. You have no reason to feel this way. Don't say that. You took out the right for them to feel bad about their situation. Everybody has the right to feel bad. You will be okay just hanging there. Stop. Okay yan. Pero pag dinugtong niyo pang, it will pass. Lilipas din yan. Di ba nakakainis pag sinabi, I'm so hungry. Kasi ibig na ma-comfort ka, uy, don't worry, malapit na tayo kakain. Sasabihin, kaya mo lilipas din yan. Di ba nakakainis? Ibig na kinomfort mo, dinagdagan mo pa yung gutom, nanginis ka pa. You don't like feeling this way, eh, di balitan mo. You have it so good, why aren't you happy? I thought you were stronger than that. Snap out of it, will you? You cannot snap out of it. You saw it in the video. You can't. It's not that simple. Next slide. Best things you can say to someone who is depressed. I love you. You know, not everybody is comfortable in saying the words, I love you. I know this. For some people, di ba? And I understand, maybe hindi nila love language yun, or maybe hindi lang sila ma-words. But I tell you, for those people who are not into words, for somebody to open up to you and to talk about his or her feelings, you should be honored. One of the chosen few. Ibig sabihin nun, that person feels very comfortable with you. And that makes her or him deserving of the words, I love you. Bigay niyo na. Bigay niyo na. It's so comforting. You know, when I lost my son, na feeling ko, I was gonna go into depression already. Grabe yung pain. I love you were the words I really appreciated. Because I felt, kahit hindi nila alam yung pain ko, I felt they were truly present with me. I care. You're not alone in this. Sasabayan kita. I'm not going to leave you. Do you want a hug? I'm sorry you're in pain. You are important to me. I'm here for you. How can I help? I will not give up on you. You make me so proud. You make me so proud even if nahihirapan. Encourage them. Galing mo. At talaga namang magaling sila. Hirap na hirap. Nakakatayo pa sila. It's really very difficult. I'm not going anywhere. I love you on your good days and bad days. Another words that really helped me get by. I loved it when people would always say, it's always my hashtag. It's okay not to be okay. Because hindi naman pwedeng everyday okay ka, di ba? It's okay that you're going through some heart problems, some mental problems. Next slide, please. Eto na, si stigma. You know, stigma, it is moving faster than we all are. But this has to stop. It's one of the major reasons why children are taking their lives now. Parents, this is for us. Some of us friends practice stigma. We are in denial when our loved ones come to us. There's guilt kasi. But you know what? Let's set our guilt aside. Let's help our children. Humans have an innate will to live. I think we all pretty much agree on that. To take one's life, by definition, is an act of a mental condition. Now, since Jesus was compassionate to the sick, we must show the same compassion. Can we just stop calling them names? Ito kasi may topak, yan naman si ano, sira ulo yan, palagi nilang depressed. Let's stop calling them names or labeling them with words like coward, weird. You know, the truth is, we have no idea how hard these people fought to stay alive. What we saw, yung suicide part, what we saw is just the tail end of their lives. But how they fought every day to stay alive is so difficult. And the truth is, our chances of standing as strong as them is close to zero. So let's break the stigma and break the silence. Come on, people, stigma doesn't start with them, it starts with us. Tayo yung nandidiri sa kanila, tayo yung ayaw makipagbarkada sa kanila eh. I went to Baguio, I gave a talk, it was such a small community of 120 children. Lahat sila, they had this card. Kasi ang tawag sa card na yun when you have a mental condition? PWD. Lahat sila may PWD. At dahil lahat sila may sakit, ako lang yung walang sakit doon, lahat sila depressed. Pati si Manong Ari Verzosa, he gives a testimony, he suffers from bipolar. Yung pinaka-head nila, may bipolar. Ako lang nga yung pinaka-okay doon. Pero sa kanila, ako yung pinaka-abnormal. Lahat sila normal. And they were so cute. They were all saying, ay, di ba Sheila? Wala kang PWD card. Hindi ka in. Sabi ko, ay, nainggit. Gusto ko din may ganyan. Eh, kailangan may mental condition ka. Di ba? And how nice to look at them that they were so secure in their own community. Pero paglabas na nila ng Baguio, ay, ano na sila? Kailangan ba na naman sila? Because some of them lost their jobs. Nung nalaman ng boss nila, ay may bipolar na ganyan. Eh ano ngayon kung may bipolar? I've seen them. I've seen these people with bipolar. They function so well, multi-talented. Baka mas magaling pa nga sila sa normal eh. Why are they judged? Let us stop judging them. Let us stop judging them. World Health Organization has now come out with the statistics that we are losing 800,000 people to suicide every year. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death from 15 to 29 years old. Now, some of you will think, 800,000, parang ang liit yata, no? Yung mundo natin, yung population, laki-laki. 800,000, to break it down, is we are losing one child every 40 seconds. Yes, 40. Every 40 seconds, you are losing one person. And right now, at this very moment, as I speak, we just lost one person to suicide in some part of the world, and that person could have been a child. Could have been a 15-year-old, 10-year-old, a 6-year-old being the youngest child declared with suicide. 6 years old. And I need to start counting right now, another 40 seconds, and we are about to lose another child, and another one, and another one, and another one. Until when are we going to sit back in silence and watch these people take their lives one after another? Kaya nyo? Kaya di manood? Kaya nyo tiisin na we're not doing anything and we're just practicing stigma? Right? Will you join me in being part of the generation that breaks the silence? Will you join me in being the strong voice of the silent epidemic? What we need to do is to talk about love, compassion, and connection. People who are willing to empathize and engage in the toughest conversations. Why are you here? Are you willing to be a part of it and make an impact in the lives of others? Because if your answer to me is yes, this I say to you now, play your part. Come on, people, it's time you play your part. Why are you here? May I ask all of you to please put your right hand on top of your chest? What do you feel? What you're feeling is not just a heartbeat. It's called purpose. You're here for a reason. I see some mommies, some daddies. We have fathers here. I'm sure yung mga daddy, Saturday, minsan nagtatrabaho yan. Mommy, di ba dapat nasa bahay kayo, you're doing errands? But you're here. You were called for a reason. You were called for a purpose. Do not ever estimate your power of saving a life. Lives, for that matter. You can do more than just one. You've got it in you. How? Easy. All you have to do is to be there. Your presence can comfort a grieving spirit, heal an invisible wound, act as medicine to those who are suffering in silence, lift a crushed soul, warm a cold heart, beautify the bearer. Your presence can bring so much love to one human being. Be there and watch yourselves change the world. We have all these doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, therapists, medication, lahat na. Pag sama-samahin mo yan, magaling naman talaga. But they can only do so much. It's your presence, it's your love, it's your empathy, it's your comfort that these people need. Let's remove the stigma. Why am I here? I'm not just a mom, I'm not just a wife, I'm a businesswoman. I have work waiting for me. It's a Saturday. I own the business. I work till Sundays. I have things to do at home. My kids are at home. Hindi ko nga sila dapat iniiwan eh, but I'm here. I'm here because studies and research shows that for every group of 5, there is one person suffering from a mental condition. With this kind of a crowd, mahina 50, 70. There's quite a number inside this room. I came here for you. I didn't come here to speak to a crowd. I came here to speak to that one person that needs to hear my story to keep fighting. And it doesn't matter if it's a crowd of 1 or a crowd of 10,000, I would still choose to be here. I would still choose you. You know why? Because you matter. You hear me? I'm speaking to you, to that one person out there that is battling with suicide, struggling with an invisible bar. I want you to know, you matter. You are worthy. You are loved. There's a whole lot of us out here willing to fight this battle with you and for you. So don't you ever stop fighting the good fight and keep letting your light shine. We have a suicide number that was put up by Ms. Chini Colborn Foundation. She also lost her daughter to suicide 14 years ago. Can we show the hotline numbers, please? If you're battling with anything, please, there's always someone that you can call, someone you can talk to. I have an Instagram account, I have a Facebook account. Feel free to just vent out if you need anyone. Thank you for having me.
He is a fellow and past president for 3 terms of the Philippine Psychiatric Association. He is currently the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the Medical City General Hospital. Let us welcome child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, Dr. Cornelio Banaa.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I think everybody will agree that we have had a very powerful morning, that standing here is almost anticlimactic. Now we're going to shift a little bit. My message isn't going to be any pleasant. It's going to be worrisome. I'm going to talk about, slides please, the mental health crisis going on among children and adolescents. There is a big crowd of young people here, and as I walk around, I see them, and I'm very, very happy and proud that they are present. This is all about you guys. I'm not talking about every one of you in particular, but your general population of young people. Mental health has become a crisis. Even here in Cebu, I think you hear of people jumping out of buildings. Just before we left Manila, a young student jumped out of the building with suicide. We have a lot of cutters. We have a lot of mental health issues among the young. Why is the big question? Next slide, please. I think my friend Dr. Benaventura had emphasized that there is no health without mental health. This is the WHO mantra that we should all take to heart. Next slide. And this is a definition of mental health in children. I may sound like I'm hurrying through, which I am, because I'm mindful also of our time. Dr. Benaventura had talked about mental health in general. In children, it includes the idea of being able to pass through the different developmental stages and gaining the expected milestones in those ages and stages, and coming out being able to cope with the usual problems and stresses of daily living and become productive in their families and in school. Next slide, please. These are the usual stakeholders, the guardians of mental health of children, starting with the family, the school, the churches, our neighborhood. It takes a village to raise a child, as UNICEF says, and a bunch of professionals that are included in this list. And all of them are worried for a reason. Next slide, please. They're worried because of an alarming global increase in mental health problems of young people. WHO estimates that anywhere from 10 to 20% of young people, children and adolescents, anywhere in the world, suffers from some kind of mental health problem, of some mental disorders. Now we keep saying mental. It's more than just mental. It's in the brain. And this is the reason why we need sometimes to give some medication. What we experience as mental and emotional have processes going on in the brain that drive this. And we need to correct those processes in the brain. Sometimes talking helps, oftentimes in fact talking helps, but there are points where talking alone will not work. Because a brain that's very disturbed, a brain that's running full steam with problems, dysfunctions in the neurotransmitters, in the connections in the brain, will not even be able to listen to any conversation. And that's the only justification for medicine. I always tell my patients, this medicine is not going to solve your problem, but this will help you understand your problem maybe a little better. And maybe we can carry on a more reasonable conversation because we are controlling those processes that drive those wild emotions. And so we will be more inclined to find some solutions in this conversation. So that's the only justification for medicine. Now, we are officially, I think, 110 million people. I don't know if you realize that 47% of our population are 24 years old and below. We have a very young population. And if you take even just 10% of half of our population, we have about 50 million people, young people, who are at risk for mental disorders. Some may actually be suffering from some kind of mental disorders. And that's worrisome. And we see the symptoms, alarming symptoms. People killing themselves, young people cutting themselves, the increasing use of substances among young people, a lot of anxiety and depression among young people. WHO also said that mental disorders in adults actually begin when they were 14, but never diagnosed because, one, there is a stigma that people don't want to talk about it. Two, maybe even the professionals at MIS were working with pediatricians for early recognitions of the early signs of depression and anxiety in young people. So appropriate referral can be made early and not when it's already very complex. We're also helping pediatricians do some interventions within their capacities and collaborate with child psychiatrists because, as has been pointed out, there is alarming disparity between supply and demand. There is increasing demand for mental health services, but there are not enough people around to provide the services. And so what we're doing is collaborative work, collaboration. And you are here because you are going to be part of this collaboration. We hope that the knowledge that we share with you will alert you to the mental health issues around your own community and be able to recognize when there are certain signals and alert the appropriate people. So, the risk of suicide, as has been pointed out, is highest in ages 15 to 24. What happened? How come the world changed? I have been in practice for more than half a century, and that tells you how old I am. I'm not the father of this and that. I'm just the oldest among them all, you know. And I'm probably the oldest psychiatrist practicing around. I can say that, honestly. And so, I have never seen anything like this in all the years of practice that I have done. I have helped establish child psychiatry in the Philippines. That's why they call me the father. I don't know if I deserve that. My sons are getting jealous because they think they have a hidden brother or daughter called child psychiatry. You know? But I've never seen anything as alarming as this. And it really worries me. What happened? Next slide, please. This is what happened. People are not talking to each other anymore. I'm sure not every one of the young people here do this. I hope not. This is a picture of what happened. Next slide, please. And in my car, I gave a lecture in Cagayan de Oro, some similar lecture. And before my lecture, I went around the mall, watching young people and their behavior, and look what I saw. It's the same thing. I was watching for more than half an hour. This group of people were evidently waiting for some friends, and when the friends came, they said, hi and hello, bakit ka late? And then the same thing happened. They're together but not together. Now, a friend of mine said, baka naman they're playing some games? Posible. Pero I think kung naglalaro ng games, you'll hear like, yeah, I got you, you know? Walang reaction eh. Absorb sila bawat isa. Maybe they're doing a group work, which is often done in school now. But I waited long enough to see whether one would say, ano ba, tapos ka na ba? Hirap nito, hindi ko pa natatapos. There will be some conversation. But no, for more than half an hour of me standing by, everybody was just absorbed with his own cell phone. And so they are connected but not connected. So, it's easy to think, and very tempting to think, that did the cell phone change our world? I think everybody will agree that the new technology had in fact changed our world, you know? And the world is changing very fast. And the rest of us, me especially at my age, is trying very hard to catch up. But I have Viber. I have my own social media, but no Facebook. Okay, next slide please. So, let's see the history and see whether there is some correlation. The smartphones came out in 2007. It's a powerful tool. We all have that. I have that in my pocket and I keep checking this every so often. And then this is very handy. You take pictures instantly. You don't even have to take down notes. You just pictures. of this life. So it's a very handy tool. But how come it began to change some behavior of young people? About 3 or 4 years after the introduction of the smartphone, observers of behaviors of young people, social psychologists, psychiatrists, began to notice changes. They meet less and less. They're not meeting up. And if they meet up, they do that. They're on their cell phones. There's less and less eye contact. And there is more time with internet and social media. It is not so much the amount of time they spend with the digitals, but the amount of time that is missed because of the time spent on digital. The amount of time talking with someone, doing sports, running around, chatting with friends, those are all lost because of the time spent with digitals. Whether it's a cell phone, a tablet, or a computer, they spend a lot of time at the expense of personal and interpersonal experiences. And I've never seen a group so insecure. And many people blame the social media because the social media always puts the best foot forward. And someone who is secretly not at his or her best will feel envy. That's why there's a note somewhere that social media breeds a lot of envy. In fact, I have a patient, newly graduated. She's working, but she's not happy with her salary. She resigned and looking for a job and getting depressed, sad, And she opened her Facebook, lo and behold, she has a classmate who announces she's getting this big salary and she's going to take a trip to Mount Everest because she wants to climb Mount Everest. She became very depressed and became my patient. And when I said, hindi kaya fake news? Di ba? Dami namang fake news. But when you're depressed, you would rather listen to the negative than the positive. Your mind, your eyes become blind to the positive. And there's always the growth of what is bad. So, they are less religious. It's not uncommon for me to ask sometimes, do you ever pray? And they would say, no, I'm an atheist. Again, I have a patient who's very depressed because she comes from a good family, very devout Catholics, and her mother keeps asking her to go to church with her. She's now actually 21, and she goes and she says, I hate myself because I'm fighting it. I don't believe in my mother's God anymore. So there is a disengagement with religion, and they're so stressed. And maybe this is connected with the sudden increase in mental health disorders that by 2013, WHO had come up with these figures. Next slide, please. There's so much more to be said about the cell phone, actually. It's a good tool. It's very handy. It's always on. That's why sometimes this generation is called the always-on generation. They never turn off their cell phones. They just put them to sleep. But it's always on. Now, this author, Jean Puenge, is a social psychologist and wrote this interesting book, Gen I, Gen, Why Today's Superconnected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adult Life. Now, it's not fair to say they're completely unprepared for adult life. Maybe not prepared for the kind of adult life that we have now in our time. But they are evolving a different world. And maybe they will fit in the world that is slowly evolving before our eyes. It's an evolving world. We're changing. So she also wrote in an article, has the smartphone destroyed a generation? Now, that sounds like a bad rap for the smartphones, which actually is a good tool. A recent article coming from Oxford of a study done similarly says there is no connection between mental health and the use of the cell phone. So there are those contradicting findings. But on the other hand, we see for a fact, and WHO says for a fact, that the problem has increased, has in fact surged. And what is the explanation? Maybe cell phone is not the total explanation, but it is perhaps the most proximate. It is the most immediate explanation. There is so much going on in the world that can make one feel depressed. Turn on your TV and turn on your CNN and all you see is the war in the Middle East, statements of presidents all over the world with stupid remarks, that makes you feel that these the leaders of this new world, So, and children get so depressed. The leaders don't take the climate change seriously, and you have a young girl like Greta Thunberg, who says, we don't trust you. You generations all ahead of us destroy this world. You're leaving a destroyed world to us, and if you're not going to fix it, we're going to fix it. This is the voice of this new generation. They're angry, they want to change the world, but I don't know whether they have all the tools to do that. They need the support of the generation that is us and the millennials. Next slide, please. Who are the iGen, or what sometimes is called Gen Z? They were born 1995. By now, the oldest, the first wave, would be 24 years old. They're going to be the fresh graduates or already working, starting their work, or maybe in medical school or law schools. They grew up with cell phones, Instagram page, before starting high school. They do not remember a time before there was no internet. Many of us here remember a time when there was no internet, right? I mean, you don't remember a time when there was no internet. I remember a time when there was no even telephone, landline, And my first landline was a party line. Diba? Some of you would remember, party line, please, may emergency lang, But the young people don't remember a time when there's no internet. And so they get very impatient. Everything has got to be instant. There has to be quick answers. I had a patient who waiting for his internet, ikot lang ng ikot, tinapon niya yung kanyang laptop sa inis niya, This is how impatient they can be. But what did that show? Emotional dysregulation, which is a major problem now. How to regulate emotion.
Okay, for Dr. Bob, one of my professors said that the generation now has a snowflake culture, which implies that when faced with few problems, our morale easily crumbles. How should resiliency be fostered among the young?
That's a pretty interesting analogy.
Yeah, snowflake culture.
Thank you for
Snowflake
that
culture.
interesting question.
Snowflake culture.
Kasi this pertains particularly with the youth.
Yes.
And I will actually defer to Dr. Banal about this. Kasi specifically because resiliency is something that Dr. Banal also talks about. So he's a very profound response to it.
Okay. All right, Dr. Banal.
Galing mo naman magpasa.
No, I believe, Doctor had a talk. He had a talk recently on resilience.
Actually,
Resilience.
resiliency is a goal for every one of us, and it's a product of life experiences. There are really no exercises that we can do. If they're not resilient, we have designed some manuals of exercises that we can do. Pero when we're growing up, you don't show exercises to your children. You encourage those passions that I told you about. They become less resilient because there is less person-to-person experiences. What does that do? You fight with your friends and you learn how to resolve it. And you become resilient in problem solving. You begin to learn that there are problems, but there are ways of dealing with problems, You learn how to tolerate emotions no matter how sad, because with face-to-face interaction, anyway, magbabati naman kayo next week, What I mean is, by living life and being exposed to the many stresses of life and learning how to survive that with the guidance and help of parents, we become resilient. Now, there are groups of people who really not resilient, have lost that opportunity to grow well. Maybe many of the young people who are the ones I talked about, and many street children have lost their resilience, there are programs. We have created in Ateneo the CEFAM program and then the program of REPRO or Resiliency program. We have made a manual and there are exercises that can be done. And we've been doing this to a lot of institutions. Even here in Cebu, that was already done. Okay?
Thank you, Doctor. I think we have a question.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, here's something interesting, and I had a follow-up question for Sheila for this. It says, if someone attempted suicide and was not successful, is there a tendency for that person to try it again, doctors?
Oh yes, the risk is actually higher. Within 3 months, the risk is about 40 to 50% that they will attempt
Really?
again within 3 months. And that's the reason why after the first attempt, that's what we recommend. We isolate, treat the patient, because that's really critical.
Okay, can I add to that?
Yeah.
Just to prove that it is true, this happened to me. My son had a first attempt. It happened in the exact same manner. He was caught in his bed by his friends with a gun on his mouth. Nakita na siya. So again, I will repeat, if you have friends suffering from depression, kung nahuli nyo ng ganyan, it's a cry for help. It's going to happen. And to those children who are attempting to do it to yourself, you saw how I was kanina, that is nothing. The brokenness you saw in me earlier, oh, that's nothing. You should see me at home. You should see my husband at home. We are broken people. When you see us smiling, we are smiling because we're trying to be okay, but we are broken behind that smile. My children are suffering too. So naging okay kayo because you took your life, feeling you okay na, but remember the loved ones that you are leaving behind will be suffering till the end of time.
That's why
When
she
it
does,
is to suicide, I just point this out. Among the number one top is really a previous suicide attempt. The other one is suicide in the family. The history of suicide in the family makes it easier for a member to try to commit suicide.
Okay. Wait, that's why Sheila's commendable. But I wanted to ask you personally, So I suppose after that happened to Renzo, I'm sure you were looking at your other kids with eagle eyes. So how do you manage that? I'm just wondering.
Okay, so now we're doing family counseling. We do individual counseling. We're going 2 years now in April, but we don't stop. As a matter of fact, the first few months, my other daughter, the youngest, did not want to do counseling. She felt she was okay. Nakapag-leave na daw siya, umiyak na daw siya. She didn't want. The counseling only took place it started with Kathy pa nga a year ago lang. Nag-umpisa siya. And then now she's continuing. There is also the grief, what they call it, the latter part, or the delay yung grief yata. So, yeah, we're doing counseling. Of course, the family is more solid now, more changes are happening, but definitely counseling and seeing a doctor is really a big help.
Okay. Next
Can I
question.
add
I'm
to
sorry.
the
Yes, go ahead.
Kasi the aftermath of suicide is very critical for those who are left behind. And that's why people like Kathy have a very critical role in this, because they need to deal with survivor guilt. Because people left behind often feel that at some point that it was their fault as well. And it's not. Because no matter how much you think was there something that I could have done? It's not good to act like that, diba?
That's true. Yeah.
Very important. For those, again, I'm addressing this to those people who are battling with suicide. We feel you, we hear you, please get help. I'm just saying that the day that you decide to take your life, the family will, aside from the fact that it will be broken, literally, figuratively, mababroken. Muntik na rin kami maghiwalay ng asawa ko. That's how bad it's gonna be. Because all we did was blame each other. At the end of the day, wala namang may kasalanan eh. But we blamed each other. My daughter, who at the time was only 16, na walang kaalam-alam sa buhay, blamed herself too. Because she said, she's an honor student kasi. So feeling niya, because every time that she's complaining about her grades, baka doon nape-pressure niya yung kapatid niya indirectly. So feeling niya, Mom, I think it's my fault too. At 2 a.m., I would catch her in my son's room. Umiiyak. At saka yung iyak niya nanginginig na parang nangingisay. Can you imagine the mom seeing her daughter that way? And it's not even her fault. So I'm telling you, please keep fighting the good fight because it's very painful for the people left behind.
Good fight. Yeah. Thank you, Sheila, for sharing that. Okay, next. There are people who have symptoms of anxiety and depression, but they refuse the help of others and deny that they have depression. How can we reach out to them? Doctors.
Well, a forum like this is a very good way of reaching out to them
Plugging,
because the
shameless plug.
conversation of stigma, we touch on that. And we learn that, stigma has no place. Feeling depressed, feeling anxious is just like having a fever or having a pneumonia, But depression can be worse because the threat of suicide is very strong.
I will address this now to the children. I spoke to my son 3 days before he took his life. He died Friday. Tuesday morning, he texted me. He said, "Mom, I cannot come home tonight because my friend passed on." I said, "Oh, who died?" He gave the name and I said, "Oh my God, how did he die?" Sabi niya, "Ma, he died by suicide." Ding! Takot na ako. I called for him. I said, "No, you cannot not come home tonight. Before you go to the wake, come to the house first, we will talk." I spoke to him and my daughter, my dalaga, and I said, "Okay kids, ang dami na suicide. I hope you kids are not thinking of suicide." Nasa kitchen kami, nakaganon pa siya. Ma, as if naman, ganyan. It was a 30-minute full-blown conversation and I spoke to them and I said, "Kids, we are here for you. There is nothing we cannot overcome together. We will help you." Ma, 30 minutes na tayo nag-uusap, balik na yata ko already. May ganun pa siya. It was so light. I lost him 3 days after. Now, to you children, pag ang parents nyo naman, lumapit na sa inyo, tinanong kayo. Parents are not pretending, ha? We don't do this to pretend chill kami, kunyari we wanna help, but actually annoying kayo. Of course not. When we ask you, please, we need you to be honest to us. There is nobody in this world who can help you. As I said earlier, doctors are here, medications are here, top of the line doctors pa yan, ha? But they also have their limit eh. At the end of the day, it is us parents, our love and comfort. We will do this together as a family. So when your parents come and talk to you, please open up. They will help you. You are not a burden to them. Huwag yung iisipin, baka dagdagan ko ng problema ng mami ko. Dadagdagan niyo pag tinandan yung buhay niyo. But as long as you are alive and working with your parents, believe me, it will work out.
Wow. Thank you, Sheila. I hope I just wanted to comment that, all of us are kidding around here. It's a dead serious subject and it can kill people. But I think in Filipino style, if we learn to take it with a little bit of humor and resiliency, then that's how we can go on with this a little more, no? Or just face it, no? My turn? Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. Are introverts or the melancholic more prone to depression? Are introverts or melancholic people more prone to depression? I'm not an introvert.
I'm
By a long
introvert.
shot. Okay, so I don't know.
Studies have shown that studies have shown, kasi yung microphone na de-depress minsan. Nasa-shutdown siya eh.
Reach out.
Pag hindi siya kinakausap,
Affirm mo siya. I-affirm mo siya.
Yeah, okay. I love you.
Here for you.
I care for you. Sure. No, it's working. I just wanted to know his name. Okay. No, we're just trying to lift the mood. Okay. There are personalities, studies have shown there are personalities that are specifically prone to depression. Mga introverts are, yung mga, those who are very dependent on others, no? Those who are who feel inferior, who feel insecure, there are individuals who are very prone. And there are others, yung iba, like even extroverts, may mga, what we call sometimes narcissistic, those who have, yung GGSS, alam niyo yun, yung gandang-ganda sa sarili, yung mga gano'n. Madalis na ma-depress.
And I thought that was normal. Well,
GGSS.
Normal.
Yun, kasi di ba, sometimes a small slight lang na masabi lang na, uy, ang taba mo ngayon. They feel depressed agad. No? Uy, hindi maganda yung suit mo ngayon. They feel offended right away. So, there are personalities who are prone to depression.
Okay. Yeah, wait for a while, Kathy. Sinabi, there might be somebody in the audience who'd like to ask also.
We have a mic in the middle.
Yeah, if somebody were to get up and... okay, we do have some questions here first. If anybody wants to stand up later. You have another one first?
Okay.
Wait, one question muna here kay Kathy.
Okay,
Yes.
so parents are important, but educators also play a huge role now in spotting possible problems. So we have one from a teacher. I'm a teacher. How should I react to the right way when my students talk to me and say they have suicidal thoughts and some have actually attempted suicide already?
I guess I have to answer that. I think it's a good point for you, exceptionally good point for you that they even talk to you about it, that they're even able to share. That means they trust you. Now, having trusted you, I can see the burden of responsibility that you feel. Don't do the work if it is beyond your capacity to do that. That is our number one lessons. Even as doctors, when it goes beyond our capacity, we refer to somebody else who may be better able to do a better job. So if you're not comfortable about talking to him, you just commiserate and say, I feel sad that you're feeling this way. You may not even keep investigating, but simply say, you think we need to talk to your counselor? Does your mom know about this? If I think we should let your mom know because they have to understand what you're going through. I don't want you to let them know, that's the usual drama rin ng mga bata, But this is something very serious, We've heard these stories, and you can tell stories about what may have happened in school, and simply because parents never knew. Your parent will feel extremely guilty if they never even know that you're feeling depressed, Maybe we need to tell them. So those initial kinds of conversations, maybe within your own level of confidence, but then you shift to the next level of help, maybe the counselor, or maybe if you have a chance to talk to the parents, refer, and seek professional help if you sense that this depression is really serious.
Dr. Paul.
Ay! Depressed ka na naman. Bigyan kita natin depressed. Just wanted to reinforce, so for the person who responded, just like to reinforce what Dr. Madang said. The fact that the student talked to you and told you this meant that this student of yours trusted you and believed that you would be someone that you could help. And therefore, my assumption is that you're a very good teacher to be able to put that child in that situation of trust. And we have a process we call psychological first aid, and the first step is simply reflective listening. If you're unsure as to what to do in dealing with someone who's emotionally distressed, not just suicidal, someone who's emotionally distressed, just listen. Because oftentimes, all of us, yung graph ng Sunstar that I showed earlier, most of the callers are not suicidal, but simply wanted someone to talk to. So and people tell me, ask me this, but I don't know what to say, but you don't have to say anything. Because reflective listening is simply just being there and bringing it back to them. So when they say, I'm so lonely, so why do you feel lonely? You just reflect, you're just there as a mirror to show them their distress and be able to help them resolve that. Lend an ear.
Yeah. Can I just add a little bit more? I think our usual assumption is that when we're presented a problem, we have to solve it. No, we cannot solve those kinds of problems. We can only listen and empathize. And maybe that's part of the solution. We're not obliged to solve the problem. Yun ang misunderstanding na, I have to help this kid solve his problem. No, part of the solution is just listening and being there for the kid. And just being able to say, it must be awful, how long has this been going on? Just those empathetic statements that you are there for me.
Talagang you never know in depression. It hits the mics just when you least expect it. Okay, so if anybody wants to approach for questions, meanwhile, we're reading some that you gave over here. This is interesting kasi we're talking about how to read it in yourself. Everyone experiences sadness at some point in their life. When do you draw the line and say it's medical? Like, there's this thing about 2 weeks tuloy-tuloy. Is it valid? 2 weeks of feeling as how do you qualify?
How would you define depression?
How should I say na, okay, I think I need help?
Dr. Benaventura had shown some of the symptoms. I showed the red line. When you see the symptoms, or beginning to see some of the symptoms, then you know he's crossing that red line. And what are the symptoms again? Feeling sad for at least 2 weeks, consistently. You see him always tired, avoiding company, avoiding even playing his favorite games, and then he starts, not having good sleep, having problem with sleep, and if you get expressions of "I'm useless," nothing really works, nothing really matters, then you know it's very serious matter. Then you know he has crossed that red line. The usual timeline is 2 weeks of feeling sad.
Feeling sad pretty much non-stop, no?
Non-stop.
Tuloy-tuloy siya.
Yeah.
You don't like you feel sad today, tomorrow you're fine, and then,
Yeah.
it's 2 weeks of this cloud, no?
That's
it's
right.
a cloud. Yeah.
So in my case, I would also look in terms of functioning. So in functioning, there are 3 aspects of personal function, interpersonal or social function, and occupational function. Yung personal function refers to self-care. What they do, yung mga usual activities na yun, pangangalaga sa sarili, kung di na naliligo yan ng 2 linggo, get worried, okay? Social function, your relationship niya with other people, is that affected? And then occupational, whether work or school, are those things affected as well? Like nag-absent na ba, hindi na pumapasok?
Yeah, I remember you said ahedonia, no? That's the word. You stop finding pleasure in things that normally you find. So if you're really into something and then you suddenly are not interested, that's quite alarming, no? Anyway, I have a question. Sir, we kept talking about how children and everything, no? How does the parent not transfer his or her own dysfunction to the child? Baka mamaya he's also imposing yung sarili niya. How can you tell a parent na, teka, you got your own issues also, can you examine them first? Is that easy? Of course it's not.
It's not easy, but a parent who carries the burden, her own personal burden, will always inevitably make it felt by the children. There's no way of hiding it. Like you said, the Beatles have said, if you're crippled inside, there's no way of hiding that to the world. It will somehow show. And our children are very, very perceptive of us. They watch us, They really watch us. So they know when there's something wrong with us. So I think it will be more appropriate and helpful if the parent herself or himself should seek some help, talk to someone. Or if the parent is not ready to talk, just say, I know, I want to talk with you, but right now, there's something. I just can't talk with you right now.
Filipino culture pa naman. I know it's hard. I'm not a parent, so I only have dogs, so I'm very lucky. No, but anyway. But no, it's very hard for a parent to say that I'm weak, I'm wrong,
Yes.
I'm flawed. I guess you guys would know.
I
Yes.
one
Last question?
Time for one final question.
Yes, yours.
I have depression. Can you say something about the role of nature versus nurture?
Interesting.
Nature versus nurture.
I suppose genetics.
Well, we talk about genes. Nature means there are some genes in the history of the family of depression. A grandmother had died of depression, an uncle had killed himself, a cousin is having a lot of anxiety. So you begin to worry, I carry that genes, As I had said in some other occasions, genes are not our destiny. We're not destined to be depressive if we have a lolo who got depressed or became schizophrenic, Genes are something we carry, but is either expressed or suppressed by life circumstances. If we're raising our children in as best a manner as we can, not overprotecting them, but being able to listen to them and empathize with them, whatever genes they carry that may predispose them to depression might be shut off. It will not be expressed. So there is always that, and I'm glad you used the words nurture and nature, there is always that very intimate interplay between nurture and nature, what we are born with. And so rearing of the child is the experience most important to the child and can either express or suppress the genes, whatever genes had been inherited.
In other words, nurture can trump nature.
Nature, yes. And
Yes.
your history is not your destiny.
Yes,
Yeah.
quotable
Your
hashtag
history
nila.
is not your destiny.
Remember. Okay,
Actually,
so
there's even a scientific name for that. It's called epigenesis.
epigenesis. So your epigenesis is the nature. No, it's the
Nurturing.
yeah. When nurture. So you tell yourself, when in doubt, I will practice epigenesis.
When
napaka
nature trumps, when
nurture.
nurture trumps nature, that can be passed on.
Yes.
That gene can be passed on. Kumbaga ma-overcome mo rin yung adversity of an inherited gene.
Okay, great. So we're not stuck in that. Okay. So with that, I'd just like to ask our distinguished panel of friends and speakers to say just their final words before we close. Let's start with finale na si Doctor. Ikaw muna. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I hope you pass on everything.
Epigenesis talaga.
Epigenesis, what you learned here this morning. Share it with your family. Share it with your friends. I think we have a good crowd here today. So thank you for that. And you can help further the cause of mental wellness if you pass it on to others.
Again, I'd like to thank Fiat and Project Sampaguita for this opportunity, and to thank all of you as well for being here, because everyone counts, and your presence here is very critical to the work that we do as well.
Yes, I also want to thank, of course, Fiat and Project Sampaguita for putting up this event. And again, for all of you for waking up early, for being fully present, and for even sitting here for 3-4 hours. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you are able to implement it outside. God bless you all.
Dr. B.
I'm very grateful, very happy that you're all here. We did not expect as big a crowd as this, and it's a special delight. As we always say, knowledge is power. Whatever knowledge we have shared between us now should empower us, and we should use that power to change somebody else's life. Don't be afraid to use that power. There's a special reason why we are all here today.
Kasi
As
sabi
Sheila
mo
had
daw,
shared.
warriors.
You are all going to be mental health warriors.
Yes.
You're going to fight for mental health. You
Yes.
will help us in this campaign for mental health. And therefore, welcome. You're going to be warriors of mental health.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
speaking as a depressive who's still living with it, I'm telling you, I cannot for the life of me express how ecstatic I am that I can tell you here that I'm depressed and not be afraid of censure or judgment or stigma. I don't know kung makapalang mukha ko, but I think it's because basically we all know so much more, and and all of this enlightenment is such a big deal. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you.